Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Mind, Your Reality, Your Results, a weekly live show where I speak with an expert in the subject of mindset so you can change your mindset and ultimately get the amazing results that you want in your life. I'm so pleased to be welcoming Therese Gedda to the show today. Welcome, Therese.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Well, you guys are going to love this. I'm very excited for this conversation. In case we haven't met yet, my name is Leah Fink. I'm the owner and founder of All Thrive, and I give people the skills they need to have amazing personal and professional relationships. If you'd like to know more about that or even book some time, please go to meetleah.ca, as I would love to connect. Now, of course, you are not just here for my expertise today. You are here for Therese, and I'm very excited, like I said. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to add those as we're chatting. Even if you're watching this and we're no longer live, if you put in your comments and questions, we can make sure to get back to you with some answers. So, Therese, as I like to always start the show, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got to be here today?
Sure. So my journey started 20 years ago. I was 17 and I started a management consultancy firm without recognizing that that was unusual to do when you're 17. And fast forward to today, I've had the pleasure of working with 30,000 company cultures around the world, 1,000 plus founders, CEOs, and investors, and delivered more than 250 keynotes in over 10 countries. So my journey towards helping companies to be high performing and thriving and really empowering your high achievers started a long time ago. Of course, back then, 20 years ago, we didn't have the language culture. So that's really developed over the years, which is really exciting. But yeah, that's how it started.
Wow. I mean, and you certainly have an impressive, I guess, resume of experiences with this. So I really appreciate that we're going to get the viewpoint of getting to see all of these different pieces in action. And because I know a lot of the people who watch the show or listen are entrepreneurs, I also like that these are things that people can start with their company from the beginning to find success instead of having to come in when there are a lot of problems later on. And maybe that's a good place to start, is just with some of the challenges. Like, what are you seeing right now in terms of kind of company culture, as it were? What are some of the challenges people are facing?
Wow. Yeah. So many. But I love that you said that you can start this regardless if you're just starting out or if you've been running it for a long period of time. So if you're just starting out, sometimes I come across first-time founders saying, oh, we don't really know if culture is necessary yet. We're only 5 people. And what we don't recognize is that how we interact with other humans, that's culture, right? Culture is behavioral design, and it's a way to drive behavior. So regardless if it is 5 people or even 2 people or 5,000 or more, it's all culture, and we can really design it and we can engineer it and we can empower humans to thrive within those environments. So one way of thinking about that starting out to avoid some of the challenges that we will come to shortly, it's really looking at who are you as a founder? What's your values? What do you cherish? Sometimes when people come from the corporate world and start their own company, they have certain habits or processes that never really serve them from the corporate world, but they just adopt it to their company because they believe that that's the way to do it, right? And the amazing thing with entrepreneurship is that it's limitless. There isn't one way of designing or scaling or building a successful company. So, and it's the same with the culture, right? So it's a matter of taking the time to understand, what do you value? Why do you do what you do? How do you like to show up in the world? And how are you honoring your values? And how are you inviting others to do the same?
Well, that's beautifully put. I 100% agree on this idea of starting with what you care about, and also what you said about really this piece of unconscious habit that we all tend to have. And I find this a lot in my work, which is all relationships, both personally and professionally. And you really see how people have taken on all these pieces without ever having the chance or the skillfulness, I guess, to reflect and interact with it in that new way. And what that adds to as well, which affects everyone in their personal cultures, their personal life as well. And seeing these habits that you pick up from your family, from your business, from all these different places, it's really sad, because we can develop skills to have them be so much healthier.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes we are not setting ourselves up for success or even to thrive, right? We are being on starting a company or running a company, especially as a founder CEO, is like being on a roller coaster, right? So something great might be happening at 10 a.m. if you're a morning person. I'm not, but if you are, and then at midnight or well, we're not there yet. At noon, then something horrible happens that you need to deal with, right? And then at 2 p.m., your team is sharing something that really needs your attention and deep focus and flow, and then something bad happens again. And that's just a normal day for a founder or a CEO. So part of that, if you haven't taken the time to create a culture that really support yourself and others, you're working against the grain, if you will. It's much harder. And it's not just a roller coaster anymore. It's a roller coaster on a mountain. So the lows are lower and the highs might not be as high as they can be because you never really built that foundation.
I like the idea of a roller coaster on a mountain. It sounds very fun and terrifying and very up and down. And do you find that, when people are coming to you, because like you said, people don't always recognize the importance of this, the power of it from the very beginning of when they start out. Do you find that there's like a certain point that people reach or like signs they should be looking for to start recognizing, like maybe this isn't serving me? It feels more roller coastery than usual.
Right. So one thing to recognize is that a lot of amazing founders are very resilient. So just because they're able to deal with it, I'm sure you see that in your work all the time as well. Just because you're able to deal with it doesn't mean that you have to. So they have a tendency to lean on resiliency as the main tool, the main muscle, right? And that works, but it doesn't make us thrive. And we really want to enjoy the journey as we're building something that really is changing the world for the better. So the typical triggers for like, oh yeah, we need to design culture, we need to invest in culture, we need to double down on this. There are a couple of things we see. One is they just raised a lot of money, Series A, Series B, Series C, and they're about to scale. And the processes are not really designed to scale the company. Another is that they might have toxicity in the company that needs to be removed. Toxicity, kills the company from within, and it's really dangerous. And you can remove it, but it needs to be done in a very skillful manner. And often the people we focus on, they are the most amazing humans. So they might not have the tool or the process to do that without harming themselves or the company. Another would be that they are doubling their workforce. Even in times when the economy goes down, there's a lot of growth for a lot of companies, right? So depending on your business model. So there's typically a tipping point where what you have done before is no longer serving you to the point that you can really scale up, either help your people to lead better, to recruit better, to perform on the level that you want. So there's some inflection points, if you will. And then it's like, oh, we actually need to invest in culture. So that's typically it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that tipping point. Yeah. I love the idea of the tipping point coming earlier, hopefully, that you notice it that little bit earlier. And, you talk a lot about high achievers, and that's something I really want to focus on today, because high achievement can, of course, come from, or high performers, sorry. High performers can, of course, come from your basic starting level when it's just you, or it can come from a higher level when you are in a larger organization. You have different people and different personalities. So do you want to just talk a little? I would love to hear some more about your thoughts on high performers and really how to start that process.
Sure. So first, we need to recognize that cultural driven companies have 18% more revenue per employee than the average. And if we look globally, 80% are not engaged in their workplace. So a lot of companies are designed for mediocre performance and mediocre cruisers, if you will, people that are doing the minimum. So our entire philosophy is not to look at how can we make the cruisers, the people that are using the company like an ATM, to do less of that. How can we empower people that truly believe in what we believe in, that are so aligned with the values and the goals and the vision to really change and move the company forward? And if you are intentional about that, this spills over to how do you lead these people? We call it futuristic leadership. How do you recruit these people? How do you empower them? And how do you achieve these great goals together? So it's really a flip from just looking at, okay, so we have a mixed culture. You can think about culture on a scale from toxic, from toxic to brilliant, and mediocre in the middle, aspiring, thriving, and then brilliant. And first understand, like, what's your starting point? And then from there, by moving towards thriving or brilliant, you will be able to attract these high achievers, these people that really share the same beliefs and values, and they will be thriving, and that will also impact the quality of the products and services you're able to innovate or bring to the market. And of course, customers will feel that, and that will bring loyalty and profitability.
Yeah, one, and that is always the end goal, of course, is, you know, making it a very successful endeavor for everyone, serves the clients better, the customers better as well.
Sure.
And I'm very curious as to your thoughts, because I've talked to different business coaches, and I know some have the idea that if you want a very high performing team, you have to really be intentional about your hiring, and it's all about attracting the right people. I also have a strong belief in the idea that when you can get people's conviction, I'm not saying there aren't toxic employees, but when you can get people's conviction that, you know, an average performer can very much become a high performer. What are your thoughts on that? Can you make people high performers, or do they have to kind of be the right people in the first place?
It's an excellent question, and we get it often. So think about it from an opportunity cost perspective. We only have so much time, energy, and money to invest in our culture, in ourselves, and in our endeavors, right? So in theory, can we invest in our cruisers, the people that are doing the minimum? Can we level them up? That's the language we are using within the culture to become high potentials, not necessarily high achievers, but high potentials. In theory, absolutely, some of them. But it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of work. And more importantly, it's going to diminish your focus on your high achievers, the people that are already contributing most to the company, right? They're living and breathing the mission and the values. So typically when we come into a company, the first thing that happens is that if there's any toxicity, sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't, is to remove that, because that's like a cancer to the company, and we first need to save the patient, right? But then step number 2 is, okay, how do we empower the high achievers? How do we do that through leadership, through different initiatives? Futuristic leadership have 5 pieces to it: leading on culture, achievement, appreciation, autonomy, and mastery. It's one of our frameworks. And the key there is really to work with the nuances, to empower them. And when we are leveling up them and really doubling down on a high achieving culture, we are inviting the cruisers to either level up or level out. So it's an indirect investment in your cruisers, but you don't put all the attention there, because if you do, you're going to drive your high achievers away.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to say it. And that investment that it does take, you're right, that often it's kind of the squeaky wheel gets the oil, that it's often the lower achievers that we end up having to focus on. I'm also wondering, one of the things I can really see as a powerful piece is a lot of companies are shifting from very strong hierarchical models to more distributed hierarchy, or there's a whole bunch of different models that people are using. Do you also find that when you start working with those high achievers, it gives more capacity for a team accountability and team learning?
For sure. It's interesting. Yesterday, we had a session with one of our clients. It's a leadership program. And the VP of product talked about that she's investing a lot of time in anchoring alignment within everybody involved, and every engineer and every person contributing to the product, right? And by doing that, she allows the high achievers to be able to take initiative in a much more robust way, right? Because if they know where the product is going, they understand the customer needs and where the customers is coming from, they can actually innovate and take initiatives within that framework, right? So that's just one example of when we're building a thriving culture and really doubling down on the high achievers, it spills over, and that's part of the leveling up effect of a culture when you do it right.
No, I really love that, and I do see it as hugely important. And I'm wondering, as we're talking about all of this, because at the solopreneur or small business level, it's pretty easy to level up everyone. What what are kind of the most important levels to work with within an organization? If you're working with a bigger organization, is it you're focusing solely on like the executive team, or do you do some work with the executive team and then the next level down? Or at that point, is it then the high achievers from the executive team who are doing all that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So typically, we definitely work with the CEO or the founder 101, and really helping that person navigate the roller coaster on the mountain until we are off the mountain, and then it's only a roller coaster, which can still be, difficult and exciting, if you will, depending on the size of the roller coaster. So that is one part. But the real piece here is to think about it structurally. So think about a house. If you're building a house, and if you're building the house on the foundation of quicksand, it doesn't matter how beautiful the house is or how exciting the drawings are, because it's going to fall apart, right? Especially when you put more and more pressure on it, right?
Yeah.
So what we want to do instead is to build it on bedrock, rock solid foundation. Everything is really in place. And then from there, we can build a castle, we can build a skyscraper, we can build anything we want to imagine, right? And that's typically how we can think about companies. So if we invest in culture and really that cultural foundation and codify culture early, it's much easier to scale later. And that's when it comes in different initiatives like, yes, leadership initiatives for your executive team, retreats. We do a lot of those with our clients. Really creating that alignment, the cultural and strategic alignment and the goals for the year and how everybody are working towards achieving those goals, but also in a way that really resonates and values the values and the culture at large, right? But there's also other things like making sure that your recruitment is focusing on value and mindset alignment over just skill sets. Skill sets is important, but we are in our models, we are flipping the order and really focusing on the value and the mindset alignment first. Because if you don't have that, there's going to be a lot of issues later, right? So that's the way to think about if we're building a company on bedrock, a lot of problems never really occur. And when they are, it's much lesser than if it's built on quicksand.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great analogy, and definitely the piece about that values and mindset, because I think everyone probably knows a toxic person in work culture that they've experienced at one point who was skilled enough technically for the role. And the amount that they contribute, even one person, to culture is just wild.
Yeah.
Such a big impact.
Yeah. One thing I would suggest the audience to do is just to take one moment and close your eyes. And imagine a moment when you are in an environment where you really felt seen, appreciated. You felt that alignment and the buzzing energy coming into the room. And you were really at your A game. And look around in the room. Who's in the room? How are you building each other up? How are you supporting each other? And then you compare that. So you can open your eyes. And then you compare that to a time when you went into the room and you felt like you need a whiskey and a blanket to recover from the interaction. Right? So that's just a very simple example of if we are in a thriving environment that really align with our core beliefs and who we are as a human, versus if we have just one person that is toxic, can really damper the entire company, regardless size.
Yeah. No, I'm 100% with you. And I like that felt body experience of remember what that's like, because it is such a difference in your energy and motivation. I'm really curious, as you're going through this, do you ever end up working with teams who are either like a more middle management, or even, the head of a company who's answering to something like a board, and how that works when there's some power dynamics that they don't actually have the full say over things like company culture, where they can invest what they can change? How do you work within that limitation?
It's a good question. So if you have set your board right, and that comes back to the building the bedrock foundation, right? You're probably going to have board members that actually align with your values. So think about even the board, that you can design a culture within the board that supports the greater vision. But if you're in a situation where the board is not that supportive, which of course we see occasionally, it's a matter of understanding what they care about. And their point of view. And sometimes it's just growth, just time is profitability. Sometimes it's cutting costs, but whatever it might be, there's always room to be creative and not go to the board to ask for everything. Most founders we do, they have been around before. They are not going to the board to ask for the smallest thing, which is a good idea, right? Because that's sort of the point of a CEO, that they are entrusted with. But we have come across 1 or 2 CEOs over my 20 years where they ask the board for everything, and that creates a very strange dynamic. They can't do anything, right? Yeah. So that's the first thing. Like, you're in charge for a reason, and then you as a CEO, it's your job and your opportunity to create this vision, set up this plan, present something, and get the board excited. But also know that what happens in the boardroom is just half of the work. Grounding the decision, speaking to everybody individually, understanding where they're coming from, why do they care about certain things, how can you incorporate their perspective into your work and make sure that they feel seen and supported, and that they had a say. That's another way of navigating it. But if you can, of course, it's better to create a board that deeply believe in what you believe in, because it's going to be much easier to change the world for the better.
Yeah. I really like that. And I like that because it really does work on every level. So, because power is power, and it exists in all relationships, and especially in these different roles that we take on. And this is the same actually for an employee trying to talk to their supervisor at a frontline level as it is for the CEO talking to the board is understand them, empathize with them, get on their side, help them understand you. So I think that's a great way also to just that or highlighting the importance of really fostering those relationships in a really supportive capacity.
And investing in them, right? And that's really what you're helping people to understand, and how to nurture those investments and see them as humans, right? And not just their title, but what do they care about, and why do they care about it? Where is that coming from? Maybe they are afraid of something, and they are not telling you they're afraid of something, but they are reacting in a certain way because they have bad experience with something before, right? So it's a matter of really stepping into the with empathy and understanding, which you're obviously an expert at, and seeing where the other person is coming from. Not saying if you're dealing with a toxin that you should allow yourself to be manipulated, right? Which can be hard to deal with, which is a different conversation. But if we're assuming that the person in front of you is not a toxin, but is a good human, then using those tools are certainly effective. But share some of the other insights that you have found is useful to do when you're empathizing with somebody.
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of pieces. I mean, first of all, I love that you use the word investment. It's a word I use a lot because, we're not going to lie and say that at the end of the day, businesses are not there to make money. There is a piece of that, or to ultimately make the impact on their clients that they want. And I think the old school business way of thinking was very much of, the drive, that's the driving force, and that driving force will get us what we want. And I love that there's this shift, and I know that you support it, I support it, of the way you actually get those results that you want is by investing in your people, is by creating healthy environments, is by creating empathy. And it doesn't have to be quite as maybe directive and harsh as an approach as we used to have. And so that's such a big piece. And the skillfulness, or maybe the challenges around creating empathy, that I would say is one of the biggest ones I see, is just how much we assume and how little we truly know of another person's perspective. And so a lot of the work I end up doing is basically assumption clearing, right? So what are, like you said, what are your assumptions about someone who is in a leadership position from you based on your previous experience in a leadership position? What are your assumptions about that other person in the room who's a bit different from you? They look at you this way. You're just making all these like stories in your head about what they're saying about you. And people take them to be such truths. And we spend so little time and have so little skill, honestly, usually developed in saying, at what point is this just me entirely imposing my idea on this person and not actually hearing what is real for them? And when you can find that space of understanding what's most important for them, like you talked about, that deep value, then you suddenly have this understanding. You can get rid of all that stuff and you can move forward on such a stronger way.
Yeah. I really like that. And it reminds me of an exercise we did during a management retreat recently, where we had everybody in the management team prepare a 7-minute presentation. They could use, arts and craft, or they can do a presentation. They can have music, a movie, a poem, whatever they want, right? And this was a team with engineers, with product, with commercial, obviously with strategy, and so on. And it was really about, what do I do in a day? And having everybody share like a day or a week and explaining their work to each other. And this was one of the most transformative exercises we did during the 3-day retreat, because they started to really understand the nuances of their day. So they have open calendars, this particular client. So you can see each other's calendars, but that doesn't tell you much. So, and that's more for practical reasons, right? To be able to schedule with each other. But being able to take a step back and like, yeah, this is what I'm doing in a day. And this is how I'm working towards things strategically, operationally, and tactically on a daily basis. Or this is how I'm interacting with other departments. And this is a department I'm not interacting very much with. So really building that understanding and empathy. And that can be done like that, but it can also be done by using design thinking, putting yourself in the shoes of the other person, living as a customer, if you will, or living as a team member.
Yeah. Oh, I really like that, because once again, it's an intentional practice of thinking about this. It's not just because I've also seen people do empathy work where they just get better at assuming, if that makes sense. They do a bunch of practice and they go, oh, well, I've put myself in their shoes and now they're thinking this. And it's like, well, how did you discuss with them? Did you do something to explore that with them versus just thinking about things a different way yourself? So I really love that. We are starting to come up on time, because time always flies here. I understand you have a little bit of a gift for the audience. Do you want to tell us about it?
Sure. Yeah, so this is very timely. We have a giveaway. It's a template to create a strategic plan. So we think about culture, going back to that culture impacts everything, right? But it's really making sure that culture and strategy and your goals all come together at the same time. So the gift is a template to create your strategic plan for 2023 and beyond.
Well, I love it. I certainly recommend that people do reach out and do that. Again, like we've talked about throughout this show, if you're just letting things happen as they happen, they might coincidentally go well for a while, but there is going to be a point when you do realize something's missing. And if you can just start off with, say, this amazing template and get yourself in that alignment, you're going to be ending up in a way better place down the road. So I certainly recommend that people go grab that. I certainly recommend they reach out to you. Those are both in the description, so people can email you. They can check out your website and learn some more. And I just want to thank you so much for being here today. This was a great conversation.
It's very much my pleasure. And thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for everyone for watching and listening. We'll see you next week. And remember, every thought counts.